The most terrifying truth for an avoidant is not losing someone. It's realizing that the person they pushed away was never blind. They were simply waiting to see the full truth before walking away for good. The avoidant person often moves through relationships believing their defensive habits and emotional control methods stay completely hidden from the very people who care about them. They assume that the partner who tolerates their behavior must be unaware, must be too forgiving, must be too hopeful to notice what is actually happening. In their mind, patience means blindness, understanding means weakness, and kindness becomes proof that the other person cannot see the truth. They convince themselves that their push and pull rhythm, their sudden distance after moments of closeness, their selective affection, their delays in communication, and their habit of withdrawing whenever emotional intimacy grows too deep, are impossible for the other person to fully read. They assume the mixed signals they send are confusing enough to make their partner question themselves instead of noticing the patterns clearly. They believe that disappearing emotionally, reappearing with charm, and then pulling away again is something only they can understand, something too complex for their partner to decode. But this belief begins to collapse the moment they realize the partner was never blind at all. What shakes the avoidant person is not simply the idea that their partner noticed certain behaviors. What disturbs them deeply is the moment they understand that the partner saw everything. The partner wasn't naive. The partner wasn't uninformed. They were fully aware. They were quietly observing, tracking, recognizing, and slowly forming a complete picture of the avoidant's emotional patterns long before they ever said a word. This recognition hits the avoidant harder than any argument could because it exposes the truth they tried to hide even from themselves. Their behavior was not invisible. Their strategies were not undetectable. Their emotional distance was not mysterious. Their mixed signals were not misunderstood. Their silence was not interpreted as peace. Their inconsistency was not seen as complexity. It was all obvious. The shift happens when the avoidant person realizes that the partner's silence was not confusion. It was information gathering. The calmness was not ignorance. It was emotional intelligence. The patience was not acceptance of mistreatment. It was evaluation. And the understanding they took advantage of was not permission to continue hurting someone. It was the partner giving the relationship space to reveal the truth without forcing it. The avoidant person feels something tighten inside them when they understand that the partner stayed not because they were easily manipulated, but because they wanted to see the full pattern before choosing how to move forward. They wanted clarity before acting. They wanted the truth before deciding whether to stay, detach, or walk away for good. When the avoidant realizes this, something inside them destabilizes. What they once saw as control becomes exposure. What they interpreted as power becomes vulnerability. What they believed was emotional superiority becomes fear of being fully seen. And avoidants fear nothing more than being seen clearly. They spend their lives building emotional armor, maintaining distance, controlling closeness, and protecting themselves from the risk of intimacy. They choreograph their relationships in a way that lets them feel safe, while the other person stays emotionally hungry, always trying harder, always giving more, always proving themselves. But when they find out that the partner was silently aware the entire time, that illusion of control disappears. The realization that every pattern was noticed is unsettling for the avoidant, but the realization that every pattern was mentally documented is even more destabilizing. They begin to understand that their partner was not reacting emotionally but observing logically. The moments they thought they had slipped away unnoticed, the sudden withdrawal after a deep conversation, the cold tone after a moment of warmth, the shift from affection to detachment, the excuses, the half-promises, the broken commitments, the walls that rose whenever intimacy tried to grow, were all recorded in the partner's mind with clarity and accuracy. And the avoidant person, who is used to escaping accountability through distance, now experiences the discomfort of understanding that they were watched with quiet clarity. The avoidant feels exposed when they realize the partner remembers every time they disappeared without explanation, every time they became emotionally unavailable right after creating closeness, every inconsistency that made the partner question their own worth. Every moment the avoidant pretended not to care when in reality they were afraid. They sense the weight of this awareness because it breaks the narrative they tell themselves, that they can keep their emotional limitations hidden, that they can protect themselves without consequences, that their partner will always stay confused enough to continue trying. But the partner who sees the truth eventually stops trying, and this moment terrifies the avoidant more than they admit. As the avoidant mentally revisits the relationship, they start remembering all the moments when their partner looked at them with understanding instead of anger. Those moments now feel different in hindsight. They begin to see that the partner's silence wasn't a lack of awareness, but a choice. The avoidant realizes the partner's emotional strength was far greater than they understood, because it takes immense strength to stay calm in the face of emotional inconsistency, to stay patient in the presence of mixed messages, and to stay steady while being treated unpredictably. This quiet strength is something the avoidant cannot ignore once they see it, and it forces them to face something uncomfortable. They underestimated the other person's emotional intelligence. Avoidants often assume their behavior is too subtle to be seen clearly, but their patterns are consistent and easy to detect to someone who pays attention. The partner saw how the avoidant avoided difficult conversations, how they kept the relationship at arm's length, how they acted distant the moment intimacy grew deeper, how they used space as a shield, how they responded to love with fear, and how they turned vulnerability into withdrawal. Every cycle became evidence. Every retreat became data, every emotional shift became part of a bigger picture. And when the avoidant finally realizes this, they feel exposed in a way that shakes them internally. What the avoidant never expects is the moment the partner stops chasing, the moment the partner becomes detached, the moment the person who once fought for connection starts pulling their energy back. This moment hits the avoidant with a sense of loss they don't know how to process. Avoidants push people away, expecting them to return. They create distance, expecting the partner to fill the gap. They withdraw, expecting the other person to bridge the space. But when a partner who understands their pattern finally stops trying, the avoidant experiences the emotional consequences of their own behavior. This becomes a turning point, and it is often the first time they genuinely see themselves. The avoidant person begins to replay the relationship in their mind, noticing how their partner responded not with chaos, but with clarity. They realize their partner didn't miss the signs. They understood them fully. They didn't fail to see the red flags. They recognized them and kept watching to understand the full pattern. They didn't accept mistreatment. They simply waited until they had enough evidence to make the right decision. This awareness forces the avoidant to confront something they avoid at all costs: accountability. When the avoidant reaches this point, their old strategies no longer work. The emotional distance fails to intimidate, the silence fails to confuse, the inconsistency fails to trap, because you cannot manipulate someone who sees the truth clearly. And the partner who has been observing quietly now understands the pattern so well that they can predict the avoidant's next move before it happens. This is what finally takes power away from the avoidant and brings balance back to the partner who has been emotionally patient for far too long. As the avoidant processes this, they begin to experience a mixture of discomfort, guilt, and recognition. They might not show it openly, but internally they feel the weight of being seen. They feel the weight of being understood. They feel the weight of their emotional patterns no longer being protected. This exposure is something they cannot easily escape. It creates a new awareness inside them, a new understanding of the consequences of their choices. And for the first time, they may realize that their partner was not the vulnerable one. They were. This realization changes the avoidant more than they admit. For some, it becomes the moment they begin reflecting on their own behavior, understanding how their fear of closeness created distance where love was actually safe. For others, the awareness becomes too overwhelming and they run even further. But regardless of how they respond, the truth remains the same. The partner saw everything, understood everything, remembered everything, and still offered patience until patience was no longer healthy. What the avoidant never truly prepares for is the moment when the partner they underestimated finally decides to detach fully. That is when the avoidant understands a truth they never wanted to face. Losing someone who saw the best in them feels far more painful than they ever expected, and this pain is not caused by the partner's departure. It is caused by the avoidant recognizing that their own behavior created the loss. This is the moment that lingers in their mind, the moment they replay long after the relationship ends, the moment that forces them to face the parts of themselves they always tried to hide. What they once assumed was naive agreement was never naive at all. It was a careful, intentional form of quiet observation carried out by someone who was not confused, not lost, and not blindly trusting, but someone who was collecting a complete picture of who they were involved with. What appeared to be easy acceptance was actually a slow and steady gathering of emotional facts, a private investigation done by a person who wanted to understand the truth rather than react to the surface. Their partner's silence about these repeated behaviors was not due to misunderstanding or emotional weakness. It was a calm decision, a deliberate choice to watch without interrupting the natural flow of the avoidance patterns, because watching someone reveal themselves honestly is more powerful than confronting them too early. This is why the realization hits so hard later. It forces the avoidant to face something they never expected. They were not mysterious, they were not unreadable, they were not hidden behind complexity. They were exposed, completely, and the person they thought they were confusing had actually seen through them from the start. Every defensive behavior, every emotional withdrawal, every moment of shutting down or pretending not to care was not misread. It was not overlooked. It was simply noted, quietly, stored as emotional evidence, not accepted as healthy love. Each dismissive reaction, each cold moment, each time they pushed away connection was recognized for what it truly was. Their partner was not clinging in hope. They were not begging for scraps of affection. They were gathering proof of patterns. They were studying consistency. They were evaluating whether this person had the emotional ability to truly meet them, and the avoidant only understands this much later, when the silence becomes real, when the distance becomes final, and when they realize the one thing they underestimated the most, the patience of someone who knows their worth. The avoidant eventually sees that the other person was not waiting helplessly. They were assessing quietly. They were paying attention to everything that happened, every shift, every cold shoulder, every half-hearted apology, every moment where intimacy was avoided. They were learning how this person loved, how they connected, how they cared, and how quickly they ran when things got real. Every doubt the avoidant tried to plant was recognized. Every inconsistent behavior was registered. Their partner wasn't confused by the mixed signals. They were documenting them inside their mind, understanding the larger picture, understanding that these patterns were not temporary, but deeply rooted emotional habits. This truth cuts deep because it exposes the avoidant's biggest misconception. They believed they were hiding. They believed their detachment made them impossible to read. They believed that because they said little, the other person knew even less. But silence doesn't equal ignorance. Gentle patience doesn't equal blindness. Kindness doesn't equal emotional dependence. And staying calm doesn't mean they didn't notice the harm being done. The avoidant realizes too late that the other person had been accumulating everything like pieces of a puzzle, allowing the truth to form slowly but clearly. This awareness becomes even more unsettling because it shows them their partner never fought for them out of desperation. They weren't trying to force commitment. They weren't trying to fix someone who didn't want to grow. They were simply giving space for the avoidant to show their true nature. And once enough evidence was collected, once the pattern showed no sign of change, once the emotional truth was undeniable, the decision was made. Quietly, cleanly, without drama, not to punish the avoidant, but to protect their own emotional future. Understanding that patience was never a weakness becomes a painful awakening. It wasn't endurance. It wasn't tolerance of mistreatment. It was observation. A silent evaluation of long-term emotional safety. A study of how much love could actually exist in that connection. And once the data became clear, once the avoidance actions spoke louder than their excuses, the truth made the path forward obvious. Their partner was not waiting for the avoidant to finally love them. They were waiting to understand if they themselves could continue with someone who feared closeness more than they desired connection. The avoidant begins to understand that the emotional distance they used as protection ended up being the very reason the other person stepped back completely. The cold reactions they thought were subtle were not subtle at all. The shutdowns they believed were invisible were seen clearly. The mixed signals they used to keep control were recognized as instability, not mystery. Everything they thought they were hiding was actually the very information the other person was collecting to decide their future. What unsettles the avoidant most is realizing that the person they assumed would cling forever was actually the one with the stronger emotional backbone. They were the one capable of love, capable of emotional honesty, capable of deeper connection. They had the courage to hope, but they also had the wisdom to walk away when the truth became clear. This is why the avoidance shock is so intense. They always believed they were the one holding power. They thought distance protected them. They thought detachment made them safe. But the moment the partner walked away, they realized the truth. The one who can walk away is always the one in control. Their partner's silence at the end was not confusion. It was clarity. The calm withdrawal was not fear. It was self-respect. The sudden shift from patience to distance was not emotional collapse. It was the final decision of someone who had seen everything they needed to see, someone who realized that love cannot grow in a place where one person is always running, someone who understood that waiting would not change the nature of the avoidant, someone who recognized that they deserved a love that shows up, not a love that hides. What the avoidant learns too late is that the person they thought was weak was actually strong enough to leave, strong enough to see the truth, strong enough to protect themselves, and strong enough to let the avoidant live with the consequences of their own emotional distance. Because silence is not always surrender. Sometimes silence is closure, sometimes silence is truth, and sometimes silence is the loudest statement a person can ever make. They begin to understand that what felt like stability was actually the other person giving them the final chance to show growth, to show consistency, to show emotional responsibility. And instead of showing up, they continued to repeat the same patterns, shutting down, withdrawing, avoiding closeness, using distance as a shield. They thought their partner didn't notice the moments where they turned cold without reason, the moments where they dismissed emotional needs, the moments where vulnerability from their partner made them uncomfortable. But every one of those moments was recorded in silence, forming a clear map of the avoidant's true capacity for intimacy. The avoidant realizes that their partner didn't want perfection. They only wanted participation. They didn't demand flawless emotional expression. They only needed effort. They didn't expect the avoidant to know everything. They only hoped for honesty. But what they received instead was inconsistency, confusion, and emotional neglect disguised as independence. And while the avoidant believed this would keep them safe, all it did was show the other person that they would always be alone in that relationship. By the time the avoidant understands this, it is always late, because once someone has enough evidence that a person cannot meet them emotionally, they do not argue. They do not explain themselves endlessly. They do not plead. They simply exit with clarity, with dignity, with self-protection, and with the deep understanding that loving someone does not require abandoning oneself. The avoidant then faces the truth they avoided for so long. The person they pushed away was never blind. They were simply kind. And kindness is not the same as weakness. Kindness simply gave them time to reveal who they truly were. And once that truth was undeniable, the person who once waited walked away with a clear, steady heart. The avoidant person eventually faces a heavy truth they never expected. They begin to understand that their partner's patience, calm behavior, and continued presence were signs of inner strength, not signs of weakness or desperation. What they once assumed was someone too scared, too attached, or too damaged to walk away was actually someone strong enough to observe everything with clarity before making a final choice. Their partner was not staying because they could not leave. They were staying because they had the emotional wisdom to study patterns over time, to see the difference between temporary mistakes and long-term behavior, and to understand what was real and what was simply fear acting out. The avoidant person realizes that the patience they received was not a result of low self-esteem. It was not because their partner couldn't see the bad treatment. Their partner saw everything, every distance, every withdrawal, every shutdown, every cold reaction. They simply chose not to respond instantly. They waited to see whether the avoidant person would grow or remain stuck in the same defensive walls. This patience now feels humbling because the avoidant person finally sees that their partner had emotional maturity they never recognized. They now understand that their partner could separate their defensive habits from who they actually were underneath. Their partner believed they had potential, believed they could change, believed that the avoidant behaviors came from unhealed wounds, not from lack of care. But this patience was never unlimited. It had an invisible timeline that the avoidant person never noticed. That quiet observation period came with unspoken standards, boundaries, and limits, even though they were never loud or dramatic. The avoidant person did not understand this until the day their partner finally walked away. That moment exposed everything at once. The silent evaluation had ended, and the conclusion was not in their favor. The avoidant person thought things were stable because there were no dramatic fights or endless arguments, but in reality, their partner had been watching everything very closely, taking mental notes and waiting for the moment clarity arrived. When their partner finally left, it was not emotional impulsiveness. It was a decision that had been slowly forming in silence. The avoidant person then faces another difficult realization. Their partner's silence was not agreement. It was not approval. It was not them pretending everything was fine. That silence was assessment. It was a calm space that allowed the avoidant person to reveal who they truly were without pressure. The avoidant person believed that their partner's quietness meant they accepted their behavior, but now they see it was the complete opposite. Their partner believed in letting people show their real truth over time. They didn't try to control, correct, or reshape the avoidant person. Instead, they stepped aside emotionally and allowed patterns to reveal themselves without interference. This creates a painful shock for the avoidant person because they finally see that their partner was never blind, never dependent, never naive. They were simply steady and observant. They didn't confront every mistake because they didn't need to. They didn't chase or beg or demand constant change. They watched. They paid attention. They evaluated the difference between wounds and character. Their silence and patience were not signs of weakness. They were signs of intelligence, emotional self-respect, and deep understanding. The avoidant person now realizes that their partner's lack of confrontation was not because they were scared to speak up. It was because they were strong enough to give space without losing themselves. They had their own standards, their own sense of self-worth, and their own clear boundaries that existed even if they never shouted them out loud. Their partner maintained their own emotional independence the entire time, even while caring deeply. They never lost themselves in the relationship the way the avoidant person assumed. The avoidant person also sees they misunderstood something important. Emotional intelligence often looks quiet. It looks peaceful. It does not need to fight to prove a point. Their partner's self-control, calm reactions, and steady presence were actually signs of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Someone who chose love consciously, not blindly. Someone who waited for actions, not promises. Someone who could walk away the moment the balance became unhealthy. This realization breaks through the avoidant person's defenses in a way they cannot ignore. They finally see that they confused emotional strength with emotional weakness. They believed their partner was dependent, when in reality their partner was simply patient. They believed their partner stayed because they couldn't leave, but the truth is, they left the moment clarity arrived. And the avoidant person now understands that having someone willing to stay through confusion, distance, and fear was a gift they failed to recognize until it was gone. And as they look back, the avoidant person begins to understand that every moment of silence carried meaning. Every quiet reaction was a sign of evaluation. Every soft reply was a sign of boundaries. What felt to them like acceptance was actually measurement. What seemed like forgiveness was actually observation. Their partner's calmness was a mirror that revealed the avoidant person's deepest patterns without any force. The avoidant person now feels the weight of knowing they misread everything. They judged emotional intelligence as naive acceptance. They mistook kindness for weakness. They misinterpreted patience as fear. And the truth hits them hard. Their partner had far more clarity and strength than they ever imagined. They were not waiting because they were stuck. They were waiting because they wanted to give the relationship a fair chance. And once that chance reached its natural end, they left with dignity, self-respect, and quiet certainty. The avoidant person is left with the hardest reality to face, that the person they believed would never leave actually walked away with complete clarity, and they only understand the full meaning of that loss when it is far too late. The recognition that leaving was not a sudden reaction, but the only conclusion left, becomes a powerful turning point for the avoidant person. They begin to see that their partner's decision to walk away was not caused by emotional impulsiveness, nor was it an act of abandonment rooted in weakness or drama. It was a well-thought-out choice formed through months of watching, understanding, and gathering information. Their partner did not leave because they were overly sensitive. They left because the facts became too clear to ignore. The avoidant person realizes, sometimes painfully, that their partner had been quietly collecting evidence the entire time. Every moment of distance, every repeated cycle of closeness followed by withdrawal, every broken promise and every emotional shutdown was seen, remembered, and added to a growing internal picture of who they truly were. What the avoidant believed was invisible or harmless was actually being noticed with full awareness. Their partner was not blind, confused, or naive. They were observing with patience, strength, and emotional clarity. As time passed, these observations began forming a conclusion that could not be softened with temporary affection or occasional effort. The partner learned to understand the pattern behind the avoidant's behavior, rather than the excuses attached to it. They recognized that the avoidant's lack of consistency was not a phase. it was a character pattern. They saw that the limited emotional availability was not a moment of struggle. It was a repeated choice. And because they understood this with calm honesty, the decision to leave became less about pain and more about protecting their well-being. The avoidant person, who once believed they were in full control of the emotional distance, now sees that their partner was quietly evaluating everything. Their patience was not a sign of weakness. It was a sign of intelligence and maturity. They gave chances not because they were desperate, but because they wanted to see if change was possible. They stayed long enough to gather a full picture. They waited long enough to remove doubt. But once the evidence became overwhelming, they understood they had reached the end of the path. The decision to walk away became an informed choice, not an emotional escape. The avoidant person finally recognizes that their partner did not leave suddenly or without thought. The departure was the final step in a long process of observation, every pattern documented, every emotional cycle repeated, every attempt at closeness followed by retreat contributed to the conclusion that the avoidant either could not or would not give what a healthy relationship needs. In the end, their partner's choice to leave was based on clarity, not confusion. It came from understanding, not from hurt feelings alone. And this realization becomes deeply humbling for the avoidant person because they now see that the end was not a surprise. It was a conclusion built slowly, piece by piece, by someone who finally chose themselves after gathering enough truth to walk away with confidence.